An old friend. When I was in junior high and high school, I was best friends with this guy named Mark. I'm female for context. We did everything together. He was my best friend, after all. Mark had a kind of troubled life. Nothing too crazy. Just kind of troubled. After high school, my mom ended up dating this really abusive guy. That ended up causing me so much anxiety that I got physically ill and bedridden for almost a year. I kinda kept in touch with Mark during this time, though I had lost many of my friends due to being sick. In the time I was bedridden, Mark had met a girl and fell in love and blah blah. Normal stuff. One night, I get a phone call from him and he's drunk as fuck. Tells me his girlfriend broke up with him and that he's gonna kill himself. He tells me he's laying in the middle of the road in the country with a gun to his head and that he's gonna pull the trigger. I was scared shitless and begged for him to go inside and to calm down. For those who are wondering, I did indeed call the cops, but I had no idea where he was to tell him his location. So, I called the suicide hotline and had them phone him. Honestly, I can't remember the rest of the night, but I know I talked to him a few more times and he didn't kill himself. Fast forward a few years, Mark has his life together, so it seems. He lives with a new girlfriend, and they have a son together. I am better now, so we make plans and I meet his kid and his girlfriend. All is grand. So I thought. One night, he calls me drunk and said he's been living in his truck at his shop because he and his girlfriend have broken up and she has kicked him out. This made me feel bad. I was living on my own at the time, so I offered him my couch for a few days until things settled down with his girlfriend. Honestly, before this incident, I never ever thought he'd be a danger to me. I grew up with him and known him for years. So, he's staying at my house, and one day I was super hungover. I just wanted to be by myself and honestly not talk to anyone. He knocks on my bedroom door. I tell him to come inside. He instantly starts accusing me of being depressed, saying that I need to talk to someone. I politely told him that I'm not depressed, and I don't need to talk, and that even if I did, now isn't a good time as I was hungover at the moment. It escalated so quickly. He had me in a bear hug so tight I couldn't escape. I was begging for him to let me go, and he just wouldn't. Eventually, I peel out of his grip, push him out of my bedroom door and lock myself in. He proceeds to pick the lock on my bedroom door, enters, and again starts forcefully grabbing me so hard it hurt. I escaped again and ran out of my apartment, realizing I'd forgot my keys, so I ran back in and he cornered me and would not let me go until I told him what was wrong. At this point, I'm fucking shaking and bawling my eyes out begging him to let me go. I don't know how I got out of it, but I did. I grabbed my keys, ran out of my apartment with no shoes on, and drove to my friend's place. I sent him a text and told him to get out of my apartment or I'm calling the police. I told him to leave the spare key behind. My friend's boyfriend escorted me home and checked my apartment to make sure he wasn't there and that he did in fact leave the key. I had marks all over my body from fighting him off. I gave enough time for myself and for him to calm down, and I called him to explain what he did was wrong and why. He thinks he did the right thing, so I blocked him on everything and haven't talked to him since. I used to enjoy snooping. Not anymore. Last year, I followed my boyfriend to his summer internship across the country. I didn't have many job prospects myself, given it was a rather economically depressed area, so after applying to some minimum wage jobs and coming up with nothing but a telecom company, which I found way too depressing to entertain, I got on a caregiving website to find a family I could nanny for. After a bit of searching, I found a family who needed weekday care for their 2 toddler-age boys, and I went to their house to meet them for an interview the following day. The Smiths lived in a typical middle-class suburb, and as I turned onto their driveway, I saw the 2 adorable boys playing in the front yard with their parents. They were the epitome of an all-American family. The parents, John and Sarah, were an early 30s nice, easygoing couple, and the boys were sweet, so I instantly had zero qualms about working for them. During our meeting, they described the boys' schedules, eating habits, my chores, etc. And then they told me about Ben. Ben was an old friend and retired war vet who lived in a side room off the kitchen, away from the other bedrooms. They said he'd fallen on hard times and had been living with them the last few years while he got back on his feet. They understood it seemed a bit strange and went out of their way to explain how John had known him his whole life and he was basically part of the family at this point, so he could completely be trusted, right? Alright, I mean, still kind of weird, but these people were doing a compassionate thing for their friend, right? At that moment, I just had to take them at their word and not be creeped out by Ben. I started working for them the next week and didn't meet Ben until 3 days in, when I was getting ready to leave after Sarah returned home from work at the same time as him. She introduced us and he simply said, "Hi," in a low voice, then averted eye contact when I said hello back and offered my hand. After quickly shaking it, he immediately turned his attention to the 1-year-old, saying a cursory, "Nice to meet you," which I returned before making my exit while chatting with Sarah. Nothing about the interaction seemed too off to me, except I wondered if I'd offended him somehow, since he seemed rather cagey around me, but I just took it as him being generally shy or nervous around young women or something. Whatever. As the summer went on, I didn't see too much of Ben. He left for work between 8 to 10 p.m. most days, and he usually returned home for lunch. But I rarely saw him, and if I did, he'd just offer a nod and return to his quarters. Sometimes I'd see him outside doing yard work. Once, he came to get me, as I hadn't left enough room for his car to back out, and that was pretty much my longest interaction with him, to my knowledge. One day as the boys napped, I was swiffering the house, and although I wasn't responsible for Ben's room, I knew he wasn't home and I was curious about how a man like him lived, so I cleaned what I could of it. Upon entering, I saw a room akin to a college-age male space. Most surfaces were covered with trash or clothing, and his bed had no sheets on it, just clothes on one half. On his desk was a 3-monitor computer with the desktop on and the file explorer open, and so, as a generally nosy person, I was incredibly tempted to click around, but my conscience got the best of me. This is the one time in my life I'm glad I wasn't a snoopy bitch. To fast forward a bit, I continued working for their family without event for the rest of the summer, and I really enjoyed my time with them. Working for them was once a pleasant memory in my mind. That is, until 2 weeks ago, when I got a call from Sarah. I had no clue what she would be calling about. What could she be calling about? As I stopped working for them in August and returned to school, perhaps to catch up, I didn't think it'd be this. Sarah's voice trembled and eventually broke as she described to me what had just happened to them. Apparently, a few hours earlier, the FBI had busted in their home, booted them out, ransacked it, and informed them that Ben not only had shitloads of child pornography on his computer, but he had also installed secret cameras all over their house, in which he was using to watch us. I was in a state of utter shock and horror upon hearing this, and I don't remember how I responded, but she couldn't stop apologizing to me for subjecting me to such a gross violation, which of course I accepted. How the fuck could she have known? She then informed me I was going to be contacted by the authorities to give my statement about any odd experience I'd had with Ben, and that I could ask them any questions I had about the case. When we hung up, I immediately thought about how I almost looked through his computer and very likely could have discovered his crimes. After that, I felt sick to my stomach. I screamed into a pillow for a while and took a long shower, attempting to get his disgusting, pedophilic voyeur stink off of me. It didn't really help, and I cried myself to sleep that night, wondering if he'd ever hurt those little boys, and questioning if I could have done something to stop it. A few days later, I was contacted by a Homeland Security agent. I didn't know why both agencies were working on it, and he asked me a ton of questions about Ben, and I told him what little information I had, but that I never knowingly experienced any abuse from him. He then told me about the extent of Ben's crimes. Thankfully, they had no evidence that Ben ever harmed the boys, and his crimes only revolved around females. But in addition to the hidden cameras, apparently he sometimes upped the ante by creeping around outside the house, taking stealthy pictures of us through the windows. Was he ever really doing yard work? Not only that, but during one of the times I napped, when the boys did, he snuck into the living room where I laid on the couch and had a whole photo shoot of me sleeping consisting of dozens of shots, some right in my face. As if that wasn't horrifying enough, the sick fuck also had an entire folder dedicated to when I used the bathroom. Sarah, however, he captured naked all the time, and apparently she was the main focus of his disturbed attention. There's more, but he said that was all that was pertinent to my situation, and I opted not to learn any more about it, as I already felt way too overwhelmed. Having never been the victim of a serious sex crime before, I'm still figuring out how to handle all of this and move past it. Beyond myself, though, I'm disgusted that such kind, wonderful people were able to be hurt like this. To be basically fucking stalked in your own home by a close friend, one of their best friends. I just can't imagine how you'd ever get over that huge violation of trust in humanity. It chills me to the core. So Ben, let's never fucking meet again, and I hope you spend the rest of your meager life in prison. Longtime friend arrested for child pornography. When I was 13 years old, my parents got the internet for the first time. Being homeschooled, I particularly like the option to talk to more kids my age. I actually have some friends still that I've met then and still keep in contact with. I had one friend in particular who I met at a community website. He was a year younger than myself and lived about 4 hours away. After talking online for months, webcamming, etc., my parents allowed him to call me on our landline. We were very close, and he called me almost every night. He was very odd, and I began to suspect that perhaps he had Asperger's syndrome. This was later proven to be correct, along with a few other minor disorders. It took a lot to decipher what he meant when he spoke, but because we spoke so frequently, I got used to this. We sent each other artwork, and even friendship bracelets, but we never met in person. As time went on, we began to lose contact. I moved out of my parents' house and didn't have a computer. He didn't have a cell phone or a landline or anything like that, so I couldn't call or text. He lived off of state aid in an efficiency apartment. We would only email once in a while, but few and far between. At some point, his older sister added me on Facebook. He had an account, but was never really active on that account. She added me because I was the only non-family member he had, and she also had difficulty keeping in contact with him. I had no other information to give her, but her and I began a good friendship and still text regularly. She told me a lot that surprised and saddened me, namely that he suffered a lot of physical and sexual abuse from their stepfather. She found out years later. This added to the mental instability he had, obviously. Then out of the blue, I was sitting in the office at work, and while doing my duties, was also on Facebook. He signed in, and we IM for a few hours. We hadn't spoken much in the past 2 years, so we caught up. I told him where I was working and living. My girlfriend and I had gotten our own place, etc. He had lost his state and was living with his grandmother. I gave him my cell number, but he said he didn't have a cell phone. About 2 months later, I was on a break outside of work having a cigarette. I saw a tall, lanky man walking across around the streets. My first thought was that he was homeless, which is odd, because we have a very low homeless rate in my city, and many shelters as well. He stuck out to me. His clothes were dark and tattered, his hair long and dark. Something in my gut told me it was my friend. I hadn't seen a picture of him since he was about 15, which was nearly 8 years ago. Eventually, this man wandered into my store. About a half hour later, he avoided eye contact and wandered around. He carried a jug of water and a backpack as well. He didn't approach me and just smiled when I offered assistance. However, when he heard me answer the phone, which I assumed was him confirming that it was me. "Thanks for calling so-and-so, this is Rachel, how may I help?" After I confronted him and we spoke, I was able to gauge that he had decided to travel and stopped here in between. He didn't tell me his final destination, but I knew he didn't know anyone else in my city, and relied on my good breeding and hospitality to put him up for the night. I called and confirmed this would be fine with my girlfriend, who said she'd trust my opinion. We showed him right around the city, and even brought him food. He wanted an apple pie, which he ate with a fork on the couch. all of it, right out of the container, and even later showed him to the casino. He wanted to leave because there were too many cameras. We both acknowledged this was odd, but assumed it was one of his disorders and complied. We set him up on the couch and hung out a bit before bed. I even washed his clothes while he borrowed pajamas and let him shower. This was more of an insistence because it was a hot day, and I guessed he walked all over until he found my job while not wearing any deodorant. He wasn't going to stick on my couch, man. My girlfriend casually asked what he had in his backpack. She worried for his safety, as he alluded he'd be hitchhiking and traveling by foot, and hoped he had the right supplies to do that. He showed us what was in his backpack: art supplies, some rope, fingernail clippers, a bag of his own hair, and a gallon of olive oil that he planned on drinking. Later in bed, my girlfriend had told me she'd be getting up earlier than we had originally planned to take him to a library as he requested. She said she wanted him out of the house ASAP. I was surprised because we both had admitted he was weird as shit, and I was still in shock of meeting someone out of the blue that I'd only known online for so many years ago. She then informed me that while I was switching the wash around, he told me the FBI had confiscated his computer due to some things they found. He said he was working through a dark time and thought he had fixed it. But when he got his computer back, when he initially contacted me, he fell back into his old ways. My girlfriend immediately knew what he was saying, so we woke early and told him to change in schedule because we were called into work that morning. He did not sleep on the couch, but instead between the coffee table and couch, wrapped like a burrito and face down. I later found out from his sister that night, when I called her to tell her about these events, that he had his computer confiscated for child pornography and had skipped town when there was a warrant out for his arrest. I called my local police department and they took a statement. No one knew where he was until last month when he called me. I answered the unknown number and we spoke for a half hour. I quickly found out where he was and spent the time trying to gather more information while cussing him out for using me and lying to me as well. He said he tried to look at it to see if he'd end up like his father, and it didn't excite him in ways that they think, and that he was embarrassed and scared as well. I told him he needed to turn himself in and not to call me again. They don't confiscate your computer if you just looked once. This was continual use and downloading of that stuff. Suffice to say, if he didn't like it, he wouldn't have had so much of it. I again called and told the police. A few weeks later, his sister told me he had turned himself in. He is currently awaiting his trial.